August 1st, 1999, Ozark, Alabama. The morning sun was brutal, the kind of Alabama heat that makes asphalt shimmer like water. Officer Randy Burleson of the Ozark Police Department pulled his patrol car onto Herring Avenue, responding to a report of an abandoned vehicle, a black Mazda 929 sedan, parked on the shoulder near the city's industrial area. Nothing unusual about that. College kids ditch cars in Ozark all the time after partying too hard. But something about this one felt off. The car was perfectly parked, not crashed or obviously disabled. The doors were locked, and it had been sitting there since at least dawn, based on the dew pattern on the windshield. Burleson circled the vehicle, peering through the windows. Everything looked normal inside. Too normal. A purse sat on the front passenger seat, contents visible. Cash. Credit cards. No signs of a struggle. He called for backup and a locksmith. When they popped the trunk 30 minutes later, Officer Burleson's world tilted. 2 teenage girls lay inside, their bodies contorted in a confined space. Both had been shot in the head at close range. Execution style. J.B. Beasley, 17, had just celebrated her birthday the night before. Her best friend, Tracie Hawlett, also 17, had been by her side. 2 girls full of life and dreams, driving to a party on a warm July night. Now they were dead, stuffed in a trunk like discarded dolls, less than 24 hours after they'd left home. The discovery sent shockwaves through southeast Alabama. Ozark, a quiet city of 15,000 people, about 90 miles from Montgomery, wasn't supposed to have crimes like this. Investigators descended on the scene. Evidence was collected. DNA was preserved. Leads were pursued. But as weeks turned to months, and months turned to years, the case went ice cold. Someone had murdered J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett in cold blood, leaving behind almost no clues except a single piece of DNA evidence that would sit in a police freezer for 2 decades. 2 decades of grief. 2 decades of unanswered questions. 2 decades of a killer walking free. For 20 years, the murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett haunted Ozark, Alabama. 2 best friends, shot to death on the cusp of adulthood. 2 families torn apart by senseless violence. And 1 community that would never feel safe again. Before we continue this heartbreaking story, take a second to hit subscribe and like this video. Your support helps bring these forgotten stories to light, and the algorithm gods will make sure you don't miss any future uploads. The murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett weren't just a local tragedy. They became the defining crime of an entire generation in the Wiregrass region of Alabama. In 2019, 20 years after the girls died, a cold case detective would finally identify a suspect. It wasn't a drifter passing through town. It wasn't a serial killer who'd struck before. It wasn't even someone with a violent criminal history. It was a truck-driving preacher who lived less than a mile from where the bodies were found. A man who'd walked past the girls' memorial. A man who'd lived a seemingly normal life while 2 families suffered unimaginable grief. A man who was hiding in plain sight. What this case reveals. The devastating power of a single wrong turn on a dark road to persistence of mothers who refused to let their daughters be forgotten modern DNA technology and genetic genealogy, giving voice to victims decades after their deaths, the horrifying reality that monsters don't always look like monsters. Ozark, Alabama changed forever after August 1st, 1999. Parents stopped letting their teenage daughters drive alone at night. The carefree innocence of small-town life evaporated. For 20 years, residents lived with the knowledge that someone among them, a neighbor, a co-worker, someone they passed at a grocery store, had murdered 2 innocent girls and gotten away with it. The case inspired multiple true crime documentaries and podcasts. It was featured on America's Most Wanted. But still no answers came, until a high-profile arrest in California gave one police chief an idea that would change everything. The most chilling fact about this case? The girls stopped for directions at a gas station, spoke to an attendant who helped them, and drove away toward home. They were less than a mile from that gas station when they were abducted. Someone had intercepted them in that brief window. Someone who knew the area, someone who moved quickly and decisively. That mile became a haunted stretch of road where flowers and teddy bears accumulated for 20 years. marking the spot where 2 bright lives were extinguished. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. I'm always fascinated to see how far these stories travel and how they connect us across distances. Today we'll walk through the events of July 31st, 1999. We'll trace 2 decades of grief and dead ends and reveal the revolutionary DNA breakthrough that finally brought a twisted form of justice to J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. This is a story of friendship, tragedy, persistence, and ultimately, justice delayed but not denied. Dothan, Alabama in the summer of 1999 felt like the edge of the millennium, full of promise and possibility. With a population hovering around 60,000, Dothan was the principal city of the Wiregrass region, named for the tough wiregrass that once covered the area. It was peanut country. Dothan called itself the peanut capital of the world and meant it. Life moved at a southern pace. Friday night football, church on Sunday, sweet tea on every table. This was the world J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett grew up in, 2 teenage girls whose friendship defined their high school years. J.B. Hilton Green Beasley was born on July 31st, 1982, in Troy, Alabama. Her parents, Charlotte and Hilton Beasley, call her J.B. from day one. Those initials suited her personality better than any formal name ever could. From childhood, J.B. was pure energy wrapped in a compact frame. She loved to dance, throwing herself into every routine with an intensity that made her teachers smile. She was a member of the Junior Honor Society in middle school and cheered on the squad, that bright smile flashing from every team photo. She was full of life, her mother Charlotte would later say. That girl could light up a room just by walking into it. She had this energy, this joy, that was just contagious. J.B. stood about 5 feet 7 inches with a dancer's build, sandy blonde hair, and a smile that could disarm anyone. She loved her friends fiercely and protected them even more fiercely. By her senior year at Northview High School in 1999, J.B. had her sights set on the future. She talked about going to college, maybe studying business. She wanted to travel, to see the world beyond the wiregrass. She was ready for life. Charlotte remembered. She was so ready to take on whatever came next. Tracie Jean Hawlett was born on March 3rd, 1982, to Carol and her husband. But when Tracie was just 4 years old, her father died, leaving Carol to raise Tracie and her 2 younger brothers largely on her own. The loss shaped Tracie. She became fiercely protective of her little brothers, taking on a maternal role that belied her youth. She was gentle, thoughtful, the kind of kid who worried about other people's feelings. Tracie wanted to be a doctor from the time she was a little girl, Carol Roberts said. She wanted to help people. That was just who she was. Tracie was quieter than J.B., more introspective. She loved reading and science. Her teachers at Northview High saw real potential in her, the dedication and empathy required to pursue medicine. The 2 girls, J.B. with her infectious energy and Tracie with her caring nature, balance each other perfectly. They'd been best friends for years, the kind of friendship that feels destined to last a lifetime. In the summer of 1999, both girls were entering their senior year. They had 1 more year of high school ahead of them, then college, careers, families of their own. The future stretched out bright and limitless. J.B. and Tracie were inseparable. They talked on the phone every night. They studied together, shopped together, dreamed about the future together. They were like sisters, Carol Roberts said. They finished each other's sentences. They had all these inside jokes. When one hurt, the other hurt. That summer, they'd spent nearly every day together, swimming at the local pool, hanging out at the mall, driving around Dothan in J.B.'s black Mazda 929, music blasting windows down, singing at the top of their lungs. They looked forward to senior year with a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. 1 more year, then the world would be theirs. July 31st, 1999, J.B. Beasley's 17th birthday. The girls had plans to celebrate. A group of their friends from Northview High were throwing a party in Headlands, a small community near Dothan. It was the kind of summer party teenagers live for, a bonfire in a field, music, friends, laughter under the stars. J.B. and Tracie were excited. They got ready together, picking out outfits, doing their hair, the kind of ritual teenage girls have performed for generations. Around 7:30 p.m., they climbed into JB's black 1993 Mazda 929, a car the Beasley family had recently bought for JB to use. The Mazda was JB's pride and joy, representing freedom and independence. They drove off into the warm Alabama evening, music playing, chattering about the party ahead. They took directions someone had given them. Turn here, go there, you'll see the field on the left. But somewhere along the way, they made a wrong turn. By 11:30 p.m., JB and Tracie realized they were lost. Instead of finding the party in Headlands, they'd somehow ended up 20 miles northwest in Ozark, a city they barely knew. They pulled into a BP gas station on Highway 231, a well-lit oasis in an unfamiliar town. Tracie called her mother from a payphone. "Mama, we got lost," Tracie said. "We're in Ozark. We're going to get directions and head home." "Okay, baby," Carol Roberts replied. "Drive safe. Call me when you get close." "I will. I love you, Mama." "I love you, too." Those would be the last words Carol Roberts ever heard her daughter speak. Inside the gas station, the girls approached the attendant, a woman who would later become one of the last people to see JB and Tracie alive. "We're trying to get back to Dothan," JB explained, clearly embarrassed at being so far off course. "We got lost." The attendant smiled kindly and gave them directions. "Take Highway 231 south." Simple. Straight shot back to Dothan. About 20 minutes. The girls thanked her and left. The attendant watched through the window as they climbed into the black Mazda. She saw the car pull out of the parking lot and head south on Highway 231, taillights disappearing into the darkness. At that moment, 11:45 p.m. on July 31st, 1999, J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett vanished from the living world. The next morning, August 1st, 1999, dawned hot and humid. Carol Roberts woke up expecting to hear from Tracie. When her daughter hadn't come home by dawn, Carol had assumed she and J.B. had decided to sleep over at another friend's house. Teens did that sometimes. But as morning stretched toward afternoon with no call, concern began gnawing at Carol's gut. She called Tracie's friends. No one had seen her. She called the Beasley house. Charlotte Beasley was equally confused. J.B. hadn't come home either. By early afternoon, both mothers were in full panic mode. They called the police. At 9 a.m. that same morning, before the mothers even knew their daughters were missing, Officer Randy Burleson had already made his terrible discovery on Herring Avenue in Ozark. The scene was surreal. The black Mazda sat peacefully on the shoulder of the road, less than a mile from the BP gas station, where the girls had stopped for directions. When officers opened the trunk, they found J.B. and Tracie's bodies. Both girls were fully clothed but dirty, suggesting they'd been forced to the ground before being killed. Both had been shot once in the head at close range with what appeared to be a .38 caliber weapon. But there were other horrifying details. A rape kit performed on J.B. Beasley revealed semen. DNA evidence. She had been sexually assaulted before she was murdered. The scene told a chilling story of control and calculation. The girls' purses were still in the front seat of the car. Cash, credit cards, driver's licenses, all untouched. This wasn't a robbery. No shell casings were found at the scene, suggesting the killer had picked them up. Methodical, careful. The keys were still in the ignition. Someone had driven the Mazda to this location and left it here deliberately, practically in plain sight, but on a stretch of road that wouldn't see heavy traffic until morning. Investigators found no signs of a struggle inside the car. Whatever had happened, it had happened fast. The girls had been intercepted somewhere between the gas station and this location, a span of less than 1 mile. They'd been forced from the car, possibly at gunpoint. They'd been taken to a remote location nearby. J.B. had been assaulted. Both girls had been executed. Then their bodies had been placed in the trunk, and the car had been parked on Herring Avenue like a grim message. When detectives arrived at Carol Roberts' home that afternoon to notify her that Tracie was dead, Carol's world shattered. "I remember collapsing," she would later say. "I remember screaming. And then I just went numb. The worst thing you could imagine as a mother had just happened, and I couldn't even process it. Charlotte Beasley received the same terrible news about JB. Both families were immediately thrust into the nightmare of losing a child to violence. The last words Carol and Tracie had exchanged kept echoing in Carol's mind. "I love you, Mama. I love you, too." She'd never get to say it again. The Ozark Police Department, Alabama Bureau of Investigation, and Dale County Sheriff's Office launched a massive joint investigation. This was uncharted territory for Ozark, a double murder of teenage girls. The pressure from the community, the media, and the grieving families was immense. Detectives Barry Tucker from the Alabama Bureau of Investigation and Andy Hamilton from the Ozark Police Department led the effort. They were thorough, methodical, determined. The DNA evidence was key. Semen found on JB's body, and clothing provided a genetic profile of the killer. This evidence was carefully preserved and entered into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system database. But there were no hits. Whoever had killed these girls had no prior DNA on file in the system. Shell casings, none found, indicating the killer had collected them. Fingerprints. Several were lifted from the car's exterior and interior. Most belonged to the girls or their families. A few unknown prints remained, but without suspect to compare them to, they were useless. Witnesses. The gas station attendant was crucial. She described the girls stopping around 11:30 to 11:45 p.m., seeming lost but not frightened. She saw no one following them. She saw nothing suspicious. But between that gas station and Herring Avenue, less than a mile, something terrible had happened. The theories. Theory number 1. Random predator. Did someone see two young, attractive girls at the gas station and follow them? Did they force the girls off the road? This theory had traction. A predator lying in wait, seizing opportunity. But it required split-second timing and incredible boldness to abduct two girls from a moving vehicle in a public area. Theory number 2. Wrong place. Wrong time. Did the girls stumble upon something they weren't supposed to see? A drug deal? Criminal activity? Possible. But the sexual assault suggested this was more personal than a crime of silencing witnesses. Theory number 3. Someone they knew. This was the most disturbing possibility. Did someone from Dothan follow them? Did they encounter someone in Ozark who knew one or both girls? But investigators could find no connections between the girls and anyone in Ozark. Their paths simply shouldn't have crossed with anyone there. The case exploded in local and regional media. Birthday celebration ends in murder. Two Dothan teens shot to death. Who killed J.B. and Tracie? The girls' yearbook photos appeared everywhere. J.B. with her bright smile, Tracie with her gentle eyes. Their memorial grew at the spot where their bodies were found. Flowers, teddy bears, candles, handwritten notes from classmates who couldn't process the loss. Northview High School held a vigil. Hundreds attended, crying, hugging, trying to make sense of the senseless. A $5,000 reward was offered for information. Tips flooded in. Each one was investigated. Each one led nowhere. As 1999 turned to 2000, and 2000 to 2001, the case grew colder. Every viable lead had been exhausted. The DNA evidence sat in the system with no matches. The investigation stalled. For Ozark Police Chief Marlos Walker, who would take over the department years later, the Beasley Hawlett case became a defining obsession. This was a crime that shook everyone. Walker would later say, "Not just our city, but the entire region. It's one of the biggest cases in the state of Alabama, and we couldn't solve it." The case file grew dusty. New detectives came and went. The original investigators retired, taking with them their institutional knowledge and theories. For Carol Roberts and Charlotte Beasley, time didn't heal anything. It only stretched out the pain. Carol kept Tracie's room exactly as it had been. She wore a brooch with Tracie's photo over her heart every day. She collected angel figurines because Tracie was her angel now. "You never get over it," Carol said. "You just learn to live with this hole in your chest where your child used to be. Some days I'd forget for just a moment, and then I'd remember and it would hit me all over again like it just happened." Charlotte Beasley threw herself into keeping JB's memory alive. She spoke to reporter after reporter, begging anyone with information to come forward. Both mothers attended every vigil at the memorial site. They lobbied law enforcement to keep the case active. They refused to let their daughters be forgotten. Carol's two sons, Tracie's younger brothers, grew up in the shadow of their sister's murder. The family slept in the same bed for months after Tracie's death, too afraid to be apart. "We lost our innocence that night," Carol said. "All of us." By 2010, the case had been cold for 11 years. By 2015, 16 years. The likelihood of solving it grew more remote with each passing year. But the case wouldn't go away. It haunted Ozark. It was featured on America's Most Wanted in 2000. Haunting Evidence did an episode in 2007. Every few years, a reporter would revisit it, and the pain would be fresh again for the families. Carol Roberts began to lose hope. "I started thinking we'd never know," she admitted, "that whoever did this would die before we got answers. And that was the worst feeling, knowing this person was out there living their life while my daughter was in the ground." But in 2018, something happened 2,500 miles away in California that would change everything. April 24th, 2018, Sacramento, California. The world watched in amazement as law enforcement announced the arrest of Joseph James DeAngelo, the suspected Golden State Killer, a serial killer and rapist who terrorized California in the 1970s and 1980s. The breakthrough? Genetic genealogy. Investigators had taken DNA from old crime scenes and uploaded it to GDmatch, a public genealogy database where people submit their DNA to find relatives. Using family trees built from distant relatives' DNA, genetic genealogists had narrowed down to DeAngelo. It was revolutionary, game-changing, a new weapon in solving cold cases. Police Chief Marlos Walker in Ozark, Alabama, watched the news with intense interest. "I saw that Golden State Killer arrest, and I thought immediately of our case," Walker recalled. "We had DNA, good DNA. It had been sitting in our evidence freezer for almost 20 years. What if we could do the same thing?" The following week, Walker made phone calls. He reached out to Parabon Nanolabs in Reston, Virginia, the same company that had helped with the Golden State Killer case. "I want you to look at the Beasley Hawlett murders," Walker told him. "We've got DNA. We need answers. These families have waited long enough." In August 2018, Walker sent the preserved DNA evidence from 1999 to Parabon. C.C. Moore, Parabon's chief genetic genealogist, went to work. The DNA from J.B. Beasley's rape kit was uploaded to GDmatch. Moore and her team searched for matches. They weren't looking for an exact match. They knew the killer's DNA wouldn't be in the system directly. They were looking for distant relatives, third cousins, fourth cousins, anyone whose DNA showed they shared a common ancestor with the killer. The search pulled up several distant relatives. Moore began the painstaking work of building family trees, going back generations, identifying common ancestors, then working forward through descendants. It took months. The matches weren't close. No second or third cousins. The relationships were distant, making the trees complicated. But Moore was patient. This was her specialty. She traced surnames, birth records, marriage certificates, death certificates. She built out family trees with hundreds of names. And slowly, a pattern emerged. The family trees kept pointing back to certain surnames in southeast Alabama, specific families in the Ozark-Dothan area. By early 2019, Moore had narrowed the suspect pool significantly. She provided Ozark police with a list of names, men who would have been the right age in 1999 and who fit the genetic profile. One name on that list was familiar to Chief Walker. It was someone he knew, someone he'd lived near, someone who'd been in Ozark all along. March 15th, 2019. Coley Lewis McCraney, age 45, was at his home in Dothan when law enforcement arrived. McCraney was a truck driver. He was a minister who ran his own church called Spirit and Truth Lifeline Ministries. He was married. He was a military veteran who'd attended Carroll High School in Ozark, graduating in 1992. He had no criminal record beyond a paternity case in 1998. He was not on law enforcement's radar at all, but genetic genealogy had led investigators directly to him. And here's what made it even more stunning. In 1999, when JB and Tracie were murdered, Coley McCraney had been living in Ozark, less than a mile from where their bodies were found on Herring Avenue. He had been there all along. Investigators approached McCraney and explained they were investigating the 1999 murders. They asked if he'd voluntarily provide a DNA sample. McCraney agreed. He gave a buccal swab right there. The sample was sent to the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences. The results came back quickly. Perfect match. The DNA from Coley McCraney's buccal swab matched the DNA from semen found on J.B. Beasley's body in 1999. On March 16, 2019, Coley McCraney was arrested and charged with 2 counts of capital murder and 1 count of rape. The news hit Ozark like a bomb. Coley McCraney, the preacher, the truck driver who seemed so normal? Neighbors were stunned. That's a good man. One longtime neighbor insisted. I've known him since he was a child. This doesn't make sense. But the DNA didn't lie. Chief Walker held a press conference on March 18, 2019. The room was packed with media, community members, and most importantly, Carol Roberts and Charlotte Beasley. After nearly 20 years, we can finally say we have answers, Walker announced. DNA evidence has led us to identify Coley McCraney as the person responsible for the murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. Carol Roberts stood at the podium wearing her brooch with Tracie's photo. Her husband Mike stood beside her. We've been through pure hell for the last 20 years, Carol said, her voice shaking. DNA don't lie. Let the DNA speak for itself. She groaned to doubt this day would ever come. Now, with answers finally in hand, the emotion was overwhelming. Last words of her lips were, "Mama, I love you," Carol said, tears streaming down her face. Last words on my mouth to her were, "I love you." And I would give anything to say those words to her one more time. After his arrest, McCraney was interrogated by investigators. According to his defense attorney, David Harrison, the interrogation lasted 27 hours. McCraney requested an attorney multiple times, but allegedly wasn't given access to counsel immediately. During those interrogations, McCraney eventually made admissions. He claimed he'd met J.B. Beasley at the Wiregrass Commons Mall several weeks before July 31st, 1999. She'd introduced herself as Jennifer. J.B. stood for J.B. Hilton, but many people didn't know that. They'd talked. He gave her his phone number. McCraney claimed that on the night of July 31st, 1999, J.B. called him. They agreed to meet in Ozark. According to McCraney's version, which investigators strongly doubted, J.B. came willingly. They had consensual sex in the back of his truck. Then she left. That was it. I didn't kill anyone, McCraney insisted. I didn't hurt those girls. Yes, I knew her. Yes, we had relations. But I didn't kill them. Investigators didn't buy it. The forensic evidence painted a very different picture, one of sexual assault and execution, not a consensual encounter. Coley McCraney's trial began in April 2023, nearly 4 years after his arrest and 24 years after the murders. The trial was held in Dale County, Alabama. The courtroom was packed every day. Carol Roberts and Charlotte Beasley attended every session, the weight of 2 decades finally pressing down for a resolution. District Attorney Kirk Adams led the prosecution. The case was built almost entirely on the DNA evidence. Forensic experts testified about the DNA match, a 1 in several trillion probability that the DNA found on J.B. Beasley belonged to anyone other than Coley McCraney. The state argued that McCraney had either followed the girls from the gas station or encountered them shortly after, forced them from their vehicle at gunpoint, sexually assaulted J.B., murdered both girls, and disposed of their bodies in the trunk before abandoning the car. The motive? Sexual gratification and eliminating witnesses. Prosecutors highlighted the methodical nature of the crime, the collected shell casings, the careful placement of the bodies, the abandoned car in a location that wouldn't be discovered immediately. This was an impulsive act. It was calculated. Defense attorney David Harrison faced an uphill battle. His strategy centered on questioning the reliability of genetic genealogy and suggesting reasonable doubt about how McCraney's DNA ended up at the crime scene. Harrison called into question the interrogation tactics, arguing McCraney had been denied his rights and coerced into making statements. He pointed to the lack of other physical evidence tying McCraney to murders, no witnesses placing with the girls, no murder weapon recovered, no other forensic links. Harrison argued that his client's claim about a consensual sexual encounter with J.B. Beasley, while morally questionable given the age difference, he was 26, she was 17, didn't make him a murderer. "My heart goes out to the victims' families," Harrison said in his opening statement. "This is a tragedy. But we don't need to make it 3 tragedies by convicting an innocent man." In a risky move, Coley McCraney took the stand in his own defense. He testified about meeting J.B. at the mall, about giving her his number, about their alleged phone call on July 31st. "She called me and asked if we could meet." McCraney testified. "I said yes. We met in Ozark. We went to a remote area. We had sex in my truck. It was consensual. Then she left with her friend." Under cross-examination, prosecutors tore into his story. "So you expect this jury to believe that a 17-year-old girl celebrating her birthday called you, a virtual stranger, to have sex? And then what? You just let them drive away. That's what happened. And you never thought to mention this when 2 girls you'd just been with turn up murdered?" I didn't connect it at first. I didn't know their names." The testimony was damaging. McCraney appeared evasive, his story full of convenient gaps. On April 26, 2023, after days of deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom fell silent. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Coley Lewis McCraney, guilty of capital murder in the death of J.B. Beasley. We, the jury, find the defendant, Coley Lewis McCraney, guilty of capital murder in the death of Tracie Hawlett. We, the jury, find the defendant, Coley Lewis McCraney, guilty of rape." Carol Roberts collapsed forward, sobbing. Charlotte Beasley clutched her family members, tears streaming down her face. 24 years. Nearly a quarter-century of waiting, wondering, grieving. Finally, there was justice. McCraney was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for each murder charge, plus additional time for the rape conviction. At his sentencing, Carol Roberts addressed the court and addressed McCraney directly. "You stole my daughter from me," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "You stole her future. You stole the grandchildren I'll never have. You stole 24 years of answers from me. But you didn't steal her memory. Tracie is still loved. She is still remembered. And she got justice today because of science and because people who loved her never gave up." Charlotte Beasley spoke about JB's dreams, her energy, the light she brought to every room. "My baby girl was celebrating her 17th birthday," Charlotte said. "She should be 41 years old today. She should have a family. Instead, she's been gone for 24 years because you decided her life meant nothing. But it meant everything to us. And we finally have justice." Coley McCraney is currently serving his life sentences at William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Alabama. In 2024, his defense attorneys filed appeals with Alabama's Court of Criminal Appeals, arguing ineffective assistance of counsel and challenging the admission of the genetic genealogy evidence. The appeals are ongoing, but legal experts believe they're unlikely to succeed. The DNA evidence is simply too strong. In phone interviews from prison with ABC News' 2020 in 2024, McCraney continued to maintain his innocence. "They can call me a cheat, they can call me a dog," McCraney said, "but they cannot call me a killer." The families found his continued denials infuriating but unsurprising. "He'll never admit what he did," Carol Roberts said. "Men like him never do." But the jury spoke. The DNA spoke. The truth is out there now. The Beasley Hawlett case became a watershed moment in forensic genetic genealogy. It demonstrated that even decades-old cases with limited evidence could be solved using modern DNA technology and public genealogy databases. Parabon Nanolabs has since helped solve dozens of cold cases using similar techniques. Cece Moore has become a sought-after expert, her work giving closure to families who'd lost hope. The Beasley Hawlett case shows why we preserve evidence. Moore said. Why we never give up on cold cases. Science evolves. Technology advances. What was impossible 20 years ago is routine today. For Ozark, Alabama, the resolution brought both closure and continued pain. The memorial on Herring Avenue remains, flowers still appearing on the anniversary of the girls' deaths. The case defined a generation in the Wiregrass region. We live with it every day, said former Ozark Mayor Jim Byard, who was in office when the murders occurred. It changed our community. We lost our innocence that night, but at least now we have answers. At least the families can have some peace. For Carol Roberts and Charlotte Beasley, life continues in the shadow of loss. Carol still wears her angel brooch. She still visits Tracie's grave. But there's a weight that's been lifted knowing the truth. I can breathe a little easier now, Carol said. Not better. I'll never be better. But easier. I know what happened. I know who did it. I know he's locked away forever. And I know Tracie and JB didn't die forgotten. They changed how we saw crimes. Their case helped other families get justice. That's something. Charlotte Beasley echoed the sentiment. JB would want her story to help others. And has. Knowing that gives me some comfort. On July 31st, 1999, two 17-year-old girls left home to celebrate a birthday. They made a wrong turn. They ended up in an unfamiliar town. They stopped for directions. And they encountered evil. J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett should be 42 years old today. They should have careers, families, grandchildren of their own. They should be telling stories about that crazy night they got lost in Ozark. Instead, their lives were stolen in a moment of violence so senseless, so cruel, that it defies comprehension. But they were not forgotten. For 20 years, their mothers fought for answers. For 20 years, investigators kept the case alive. For 20 years, the Wiregrass region mourned two bright lights extinguished too soon. And when genetic genealogy finally revealed the truth, when DNA spoke the name that investigators needed, justice, delayed but determined, was finally served. The black Mazda on Herring Avenue. The trunk that held such horror. The gas station where they stopped for directions. These places are seared into the memory of everyone who knew this case. But so too are the smiles in those yearbook photos. The stories of two girls who loved life and were loved fiercely in return. J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett's story is a tragedy. But it's also a testament to the power of persistence, the advancement of science, and the unbreakable bonds of family love. Their case changed how we saw crimes. Their memory lives on in the families who refuse to forget them. Justice, however delayed, can still be found. And two best friends, separated by violence, are together again beyond the reach of evil, at peace at last. Thanks for being here and listening to the story of J.B. and Tracie. This case reminds us why DNA evidence matters, why we never close cold case files, and why families never give up hope. Don't forget to hit the bell for our latest stories. Stay safe, watch out for your loved ones, and remember, even the coldest cases can be solved with determination and science.